Hey guys, in today's video I want to analyze Roger Federer's two-handed backhand. So in a recent Uniqlo photo shoot, Roger Federer hit some two-handed backhands, and I've seen him hit this shot before, and it'd be interesting to see whether Roger Federer makes any mistakes on his two-handed backhand. So this was posted to Instagram from Keel Kiraya in the stories, and video credit goes to him. So let's get started with checking whether Roger does anything wrong on his two-hander. So when I looked at this first, it's apparent that Roger Federer is one of the most talented tennis players of all time. The way he's striking this ball is absolutely phenomenal. Something that he does at the contact that is so amazing, which is present on both his forehand and the one-handed backhand, is the vertical swing path. Take a look how the racket goes vertically across the ball. Now, this is not something that you generally see from the best two-handed backhands in the world, such as Novak Djokovic or Andre Agassi. But let's go to the starting position of Roger Federer's two-hander. And here, he's got some good fundamentals. He's got the racket head above the level of the handle. This is good. He's rolling over the front foot heel to toe, just like he would on a one-handed backhand. He's rotating into the shot as a unit, which is very good. Now, a lot of one-handed players that switch to a two-handed backhand have trouble with the racket drop, but here we can see that Roger Federer has a sufficient racket drop on his two-hander. The racket head drops below the level of the handle. Now, I will say that on players like Djokovic, you'll see a more severe bending of the dominant wrist, and the racket will drop even lower than it drops on Roger's two-hander. And let's take a look at Roger Federer's grip. It appears that he's holding the racket with a continental grip on his right hand and somewhere between Eastern and semi-Western with his left hand, and that is the correct grip on the two-hander. Now, moving on to the contact, we can see that Roger Federer makes proper contact on his two-handed backhand. He has rotated into the ball. His chest is still positioned towards the side fence, which is the correct contact for the two-handed backhand. Now, something interesting that Roger Federer does on both his forehand and of course the one-handed backhand is hit with full extension. And interestingly, on his two-handed backhand, he has both arms fully extended. Now, this is not something that you usually see at the highest level. Most players will either have both arms bent or just the dominant arm bent. And yes, there has been some players in the past, such as Marcos Baghdadis, who hit the backhand with the full extension of both arms. So Roger Federer's contact on the two-hander is not wrong by any means. Now, as we go into Roger Federer's finish, we're going to get into some problems. And the first problem is that Roger appears to be too dominant with his left hand. He is overwhelming the right side of his body by hitting this two-handed backhand more like a lefty forehand, which would explain the vertical swing path. You can see that the racket tip goes up and across, and what you will see from players like Novak Djokovic is the tip of the racket comes through the ball a lot more. So generally, the best two-handed backhands in the world will apply less heavy topspin than players do with the one-handed backhand. But unfortunately, because he's overusing his left arm, you can see that the right arm is getting overwhelmed by the left side of the body and is tucked underneath Roger Federer's left arm. You can see that this is a very uncomfortable position and is contributing to a lack of range of motion. This is actually a very common mistake at the recreational level. So as we go on towards the finish, we can see here that this position of the hands looks very unnatural. We see that the left side is overwhelmed the right side. The right arm is uncomfortably tucked underneath the left side, and then as we scroll forward into the finish, we can see that Roger Federer does not have a sufficient finish. Usually what you will see is that players will finish by hitting themselves in the back, and that the right elbow is actually pointing towards the corner of the back fence. But despite the poor finish, this is still Roger Federer we're looking at here, and the two-handed backhand is excellent, and I'm sure that he still hits it extremely well. Is this two-handed backhand as good as his one-handed backhand, or is it as good as some of the other two-handed backhands on tour? Of course not. You have to understand that players have put in a tremendous amount of work into their shots. They have mastered the strokes to a level that's incomprehensible. Similarly, I've analyzed Rafael Nadal's one-handed backhand as well, and there were some mistakes on Nadal's one-handed backhand, just like there were some mistakes on Roger Federer's two-handed backhands. You have to understand that you cannot have two backhands. You might be able to do a one-handed backhand if you're a two-handed player in emergency situations, or you might be able to sometimes play the ball with two hands on the return of serve if you get jammed, but it is going to be impossible to put an equal amount of time into a one-handed backhand and a two-handed backhand, and then it's going to get really confusing when to use either one. Now, this video has gone quite viral, and there's some people saying that Roger Federer's career would have been a lot better if he had used the two-handed backhand. I completely disagree. Roger Federer, in my opinion, has the greatest one-handed backhand in the history of tennis. Now, if he would have started with a two-handed backhand from day one, or maybe if he would have switched very early to a two-handed backhand, I think his career would have been very similar. I don't necessarily think it would have been better, because Roger Federer's one-handed backhand return is absolutely spectacular, and it is one of the best backhand returns in history. I don't think that him having a two-handed backhand would have improved his return. The only thing that you could say is his head-to-head against Nadal could have been a little bit better if he had used a two-handed backhand, because against the heavy spin from Nadal, it is an absolute nightmare if you have a one-handed backhand. It is not easy with a two-handed backhand either, but if you take a look at the way Djokovic handles Nadal's cross-court forehand that's hit with a tremendous amount of spin, he does a spectacular job defending the shot with a two-hander. And why is that? Because on the high ball there are some advantages regarding the two-hander compared to the one-hander. But again, if you take a look at this shot, we can clearly see that we're looking at maybe the most talented tennis player in the history of tennis. His backhand, even though it's not his normal backhand, it looks absolutely spectacular. And to me, what he does around the contact is pure genius. He has such feel for the ball. He's able to put so much spin on the ball as well, even though he has some classic characteristics to his game. So I can tell you that I miss Roger Federer on tour very much.